NBA Youngboy's story didn't begin in the spotlight. It began at the moment his father was sentenced to 55 years in prison, leaving an 8-year-old Kentrell to grow up without the man he barely knew. In Baton Rouge, where survival often depends on who stands behind you, a single crime tore his family apart and shaped the future of one of hip-hop's most haunted voices. Why did a robbery verdict lead to a lifetime behind bars? And how did the fallout change a child's world forever? This is how NBA Youngboy's dad was taken away, and why that void still echoes through every lyric. Shahonda Golden did what she had to do. After Jeffrey got locked up, she was left to handle everything herself, bouncing between jobs just to keep the lights on. Some weeks she worked late at the nursing home. Other times she cleaned houses for extra cash. Baton Rouge isn't easy on single moms, and Shahonda felt that every day. Rent was always due, groceries never seemed to last, and the phone kept ringing with bill collectors. Kentrell, who everyone would later know as Youngboy, saw his mom come home tired, sometimes with her shoes off before she hit the couch. But no matter how hard things got, she kept food on the table and clothes on her kids' backs. She tried to shield him and his siblings from the worst of it, even when the fridge was almost empty or the power went out for a night. When Shahonda couldn't be there, it was his grandma, Alice Golden, who stepped up. Alice was the anchor. She was the one who made sure the kids got to school, who cooked big pots of red beans and rice on Sundays, who handed out hugs and hard truths in equal measure. The house was small, but it was always full of cousins, neighbors, whoever needed a place to sleep for the night. Alice didn't have much, but she gave what she had. People in the neighborhood knew her as the lady who watched over everybody's kids. If a parent had to work late or got caught up, Alice would take in another mouth to feed without thinking twice. She kept the family together when things got shaky, but nothing about their life was stable. One missed paycheck and everything could fall apart. Shahonda worried about what she couldn't give her children: new shoes, field trips, even just time. The weight of it all pressed down, but she kept going because she had no other choice. Kentrell learned early how to move quiet, how to help out, how to read faces for signs of trouble. He watched his mother and grandmother work themselves to the bone, and he understood what sacrifice looked like before he even hit double digits. That kind of love is heavy, and it sticks with you. Still, that fragile balance couldn't last forever. All it took was one more loss to change everything. After Alice Golden passed in 2010, everything changed for Kentrell. The house that used to smell like Sunday beans and cornbread was gone, and so was the one person who made him feel safe. With his grandma buried, there wasn't anybody left who could take him in for good. So the state stepped in. That's how he landed in the group home. A place full of other kids with nowhere else to go, each one carrying their own story and scars. The group home wasn't family. It was a building with rules, staff who clocked in and out, and a bunch of boys thrown together, all trying to survive. Kentrell was still just a kid, but the world expected him to act grown. He slept in a bunk bed that wasn't his, surrounded by strangers. Some nights, he'd keep his shoes on, just in case. The staff tried to keep order, but fights broke out over nothing. Over a look, a word, a missing snack. If you didn't stand up for yourself, you got eaten alive. Kentrell learned quick that being quiet and keeping his head down didn't always work here. The older boys tested him, shoved him around, called him names, tried to break him down. He got jumped more than once. Sometimes he fought back, sometimes he just took it. He started to build a shell, piece by piece, until the pain couldn't get in. The love he'd known from his grandma felt like a memory from another life. He said later, the other boys would put their hands on me. It made me discover another side of me that I never glorified or liked. That's where the anger started to grow. A slow burn deep inside. He didn't trust anybody, not the staff, not the other kids, not the system. He learned to watch his back, to hide his real feelings, to never let anybody see him cry. But even in that place, he tried to look out for the ones smaller than him, the ones who reminded him of his little brother or sister. He'd slip an extra snack to a quiet kid, or take the blame when something went missing. That old instinct to protect, to provide didn't go away. It just got buried under all the hurt. In the group home, Kentrell started writing. He'd fill up notebooks with rhymes and stories, scratching out the pain and the anger, trying to make sense of everything he'd lost. The world outside moved on, but inside those walls, he was learning how to survive without love, how to turn hurt into armor. That's the part of him that would show up in his music later, the part that learned how to fight, not just for respect, but for a piece of himself the world couldn't take away. On December 1st, 2009, Albies Market in Baton Rouge opened its doors like any other morning. Just after 9 a.m., Jeffrey Gaulden and two other men stepped inside. Court records say Jeffrey walked straight to the check cashing counter where Sam Tran was working. He didn't waste time. Jeffrey pulled out a handgun and pointed it at Tran, telling him to get down. Tran froze, maybe thinking it was a joke, maybe just scared stiff. That hesitation cost him. In a split second, Jeffrey hopped the counter and pistol-whipped Tran in the head. The blow knocked him sideways, blood running down his face. He tried to shield himself, but Jeffrey kept the gun aimed at him, barking orders. One of the other men moved in, pulling zip ties from his pocket. He grabbed Tran's wrists and yanked them behind his back, cinching the ties so tight Tran couldn't move his hands. Then came the bag, a thin grocery sack, yanked down over his head so he couldn't see or breathe right. Tran gasped for air, panicking as the plastic clung to his mouth. The men tore through the registers, scooping out wads of cash, ignoring the silent alarm blinking under the counter. They didn't just want the money, they wanted to leave a message. Anyone who got in their way was fair game. While Tran struggled to breathe, another employee in the back heard the commotion and ducked behind a stack of boxes. He managed to hit the emergency button, sending a silent call to the police. Meanwhile, the robbers moved quick, tossing stacks of bills into a backpack, rifling through drawers, yanking open the safe. The whole thing lasted less than 4 minutes, but for Tran, every second stretched out. He couldn't see, couldn't move, and the pain in his head throbbed with every heartbeat. Before leaving, one of the men shoved Tran to the ground. The gun was still pointed at him, just in case he tried anything. The last thing Tran heard before the door slammed was footsteps running out into the street, tires screeching as the getaway car peeled off. Police arrived minutes later, finding Tran still tied up, the bag twisted around his head. He was shaking, blood on his shirt, eyes wild. The officers cut him loose and tried to calm him down, but Tran kept repeating the same thing. He had a gun. He hit me. I thought I was gonna die. The evidence was all over the place. Zip ties on the floor, fingerprints on the counter, a bloody rag left behind. Surveillance cameras caught the whole thing, but the men wore hoodies pulled low, faces half covered. The only clear shot was of the gun, a black .38 revolver glinting in the fluorescent light. That detail would show up later in the police report, matching a weapon found in a nearby apartment. The attack on Tran turned what could have been a quick grab and go into something way more serious. In Louisiana, using a gun and roughing up a victim during a robbery meant the charges would stack up. Aggravated robbery, armed assault, kidnapping, because Tran was restrained and couldn't move. Every extra detail, the zip ties, the bag, the pistol whipping, meant more years if they got caught. By the time the cops started piecing together what happened, the city was already buzzing with rumors. Baton Rouge has seen its share of stick-ups, but this one felt different. The violence, the speed, the way they left Tran tied up and gasping for air, it all pointed to a crew that didn't care about consequences. But even the hardest crews slip up, and the evidence left behind would soon start unraveling their plan. Police flooded Albies Market just minutes after the silent alarm tripped. The first officers found Sam Tran still zip-tied on the floor, blood on his face, gasping through a plastic bag. They called in paramedics, then started collecting evidence. Zip ties, a bloody rag, fingerprints smeared on the counter. The security cameras had caught most of it, but the robbers kept their faces hidden under hoodies. The only thing you could see clearly was the gun, a black .38 revolver flashing in the store lights. Detectives canvassed the area, talking to every shop owner and customer who might have seen something. Word spread fast around Baton Rouge, but nobody wanted to say much. That changed when they started looking at the getaway route and found a witness who remembered the car, a beat-up Chevy, blue paint peeling off the side. The tip led them to an apartment complex not far from the market. Inside one of the units, they found a backpack stuffed with cash, the same brand of zip ties, and a .38 revolver tucked in a kitchen drawer. The prints on the weapon matched Jeffrey Golden. But the real break came when they picked up Dallas Staten. Dallas had been at the scene, and the cops figured he knew more than he was letting on. They sat him down in an interview room, and after an hour of questions, Dallas started to talk. He told detectives he'd only gone to Albies to cash a check for a friend, but when the gun came out, he got pulled in. Under pressure, he admitted the gunman was his own brother. Dallas described how Jeffrey had talked about robbing the place for weeks, and that he'd been asked to help distract the employees. He even said the plan was to use his apartment as a safe spot to stash the money and weapons. That confession changed everything. Police now had a timeline, a motive, and a full rundown of how the job went down. Dallas's statement lined up with what the camera showed and what Tran described. In court, Dallas tried to walk it back, saying he was scared, that he only helped because he thought the cops wouldn't believe he was innocent. But his recorded interview and the evidence from his apartment boxed him in. The prosecution played the tapes for the jury, showing Dallas calmly naming his brother as the mastermind. That single move made the case bulletproof. Witnesses from the market took the stand, describing the fear and violence of that morning. The jury heard about the pistol whipping, the zip ties, the plastic bag over Tran's head. But it was Dallas's words, his own brother's voice on tape, that sealed Jeffrey's fate. The state didn't need to offer a deal or promise anything. Dallas's story, matched with the evidence, gave them everything they needed. By the end of the trial, there was no doubt left. The jury went out, and when they came back, the verdict was guilty on every count. All that was left was the sentencing, and in Louisiana, the numbers run high when guns and violence are involved. The courtroom was packed, but Jeffrey Golden barely looked up when the judge read out the sentence. 55 years. Not life by the book, but close enough. The judge's voice was steady, almost tired, as he laid out the reasons: armed robbery with a gun, the violence against Sam Tran, and a string of old charges that stacked up like bricks. In Louisiana, That kind of record means you don't get second chances. The law says armed robbery alone can get you up to 99 years. No parole, no probation. For repeat offenders, the numbers only go up. The judge pointed straight to the state's guidelines and called out Jeffrey's prior convictions: burglary, drug possession, old warrants that never went away. The prosecution didn't have to argue much. The evidence was all there: the weapon, the zip ties, the testimony, and a victim still shaken on the witness stand. The jury's verdict had been unanimous. When it came time for sentencing, the judge didn't mince words. He said the city was tired of seeing the same faces, tired of families getting torn apart by violence. Baton Rouge had one of the highest robbery rates in the country, and the courts had started handing out decades like candy. For Jeffrey, the past finally caught up. 55 years. No parole. The courtroom stayed quiet, except for the scribble of a reporter's pen and the sound of Jeffrey's cuffs clicking behind his back. That number landed heavy. For a man in his 30s, it might as well have been forever. The judge closed the file, said the sentence was meant to send a message, not just to Jeffrey, but to anybody thinking about picking up a gun. The gavel came down, and just like that, Jeffrey was led away. No last words, no promises, just the echo of a sentence that would outlast most of the people in that room. For his family, it was a door slamming shut. For Baton Rouge, it was business as usual. In the eyes of the law, the case was closed. But for Kentrell, the story was just beginning. After the judge handed down 55 years, Jeffrey's lawyer tried to fight it. They went straight to the appeals court, arguing double jeopardy, claiming the state was punishing him twice for the same crime. But the court didn't buy it. The judges said each charge stood on its own: armed robbery, aggravated battery, kidnapping. Every action that day at Albies Market stacked up, and Louisiana law let them pile on the years. The appeal was denied. No retrial, no sentence reduction. The paperwork came back stamped and final, locking Jeffrey's fate in place. Louisiana's rules for armed robbery are some of the toughest in the country. For a first offense, you can get up to 99 years, but Jeffrey's record already had strikes. Prior convictions meant the court could hit him with a sentence that felt like life, even if the word wasn't printed on the paper. And with the way the law was written, parole wasn't even on the table. The judge made it clear: no early release, no second chance. 55 years meant 55 years. For Jeffrey, that meant growing old behind bars, watching the world move on without him. His lawyer filed all the motions he could. They tried to argue that the evidence was shaky, that the testimony from his own brother shouldn't have counted for so much. But the appeals court sided with the original verdict every time. The facts of the case, the gun, the violence, the confession, were enough to shut every door. Once the final decision came down, there was nothing left to do but accept it. For Jeffrey's family, that ruling was a wall that couldn't be climbed. No visits except on strict schedules, no calls without limits, and no hope that he'd be coming home. The appeals process was supposed to be a lifeline, but all it did was prove how far out of reach freedom really was. The sentence became a permanent fixture, a number that would follow not just Jeffrey, but everyone who loved him. Kentrell didn't just wake up one day and decide to be tough. The world forced it on him day after day until fighting back was the only way to keep his head above water. After his grandma passed and the group home days wore him down, he started drifting from school. 9th grade was the last stop. He dropped out before anybody could even call home about it. The teachers might have seen another kid falling through the cracks, but Kentrell saw it as survival. He was tired of being hungry, tired of feeling like nobody cared if he made it home at night. With no diploma coming and no real family to lean on, he started running the streets with older boys. Baton Rouge had plenty of trouble to offer, and it didn't take long before Cantrell found himself in the thick of it. He picked up charges, spent nights in the juvenile lockup, and learned quick who you could trust, usually nobody. But even locked up, he kept his mind moving. That's when he started writing for real. Not just scraps of rhymes in the margins, but whole pages. Verses about pain, hunger, and missing the people he loved. The guards would see him hunched over a notebook, headphones on, blocking out the noise and the yelling. He wrote about the grandma who used to hold him, about the mom who worked herself sick, about the father he barely remembered except for the number, 55 years, hanging over everything. The anger that built up inside him, he poured into the paper instead of letting it eat him alive. Sometimes the other boys would crowd around to hear him spit a verse. Even the ones who usually started fights would nod their heads because they heard the truth in every line. That's where the music really started. Not in a fancy studio, but in the back of a cell with a pen and a head full of memories. Cantrell figured out that if he couldn't change his story, he could at least tell it his way. Every bar was a piece of armor, every hook a way to make sense of the chaos. He wasn't just fighting for respect anymore, he was fighting to be heard. And even in a place built to break kids down, he found a reason to keep going. By the time Cantrell started blowing up as Youngboy, his father was just a name on paperwork and a voice on the prison phone. The world saw a superstar on the rise, but behind the scenes, there was still that missing piece. A dad doing 55 years, locked away before his son ever had a chance to really know him. Every so often, Youngboy would send money to his father's commissary. Not because he owed him, but because he remembered what it felt like to have nobody. He once said, "I still call him daddy to make him feel like somebody. I send him money just so he feel like he got somebody there, 'cause I know how it is when you in jail. I barely know him though." Sometimes, the only connection was a call from the prison, a few minutes of small talk, nothing deep. Youngboy kept it respectful, never hanging up first, but he wasn't about to pretend they had a bond that never really existed. He told interviewers straight up, he'd grown up without his father, learned to handle things on his own. When he posted on Instagram, the messages were a mix of loyalty and distance. "No matter if I see you in the right way or the wrong way again, I'm gonna be smiling. I went through this experience on my own." That's the part people don't always see. On the outside, he was sending money, keeping the line open, but inside, there was a wall. All those years apart couldn't be fixed with a few phone calls or wire transfers. Youngboy still called him daddy, but the word didn't mean what it did for other kids. It was more about keeping a promise to himself, not letting anybody feel forgotten, even if that person was a stranger by blood. He never wrote off his father completely, but he didn't sugarcoat it either. When interviewers asked, he didn't get emotional or angry, just honest. "I barely know him though." That line hung heavy because it was the truth. For Youngboy, family was about who showed up, who put in the work. 55 years is a long time to wait for a relationship that never had a chance to grow. All he could do was keep moving forward, carry the weight, and let the world hear what it sounded like to survive without a father's love. Pain is a language in Youngboy's world, and he learned to speak it before he ever picked up a mic. When the grown-ups disappeared, his father to prison, his grandma to the grave, there was nobody left to teach him how to let go. So he carried it. That weight comes out in his songs, plain as day. On Cross Me, he raps, "Uncle told, now my daddy doing 55." That line isn't just for show. It's a scar pressed into every verse. Even on Lonely Child, you can hear it. Him talking about trust, about missing people who never came back, about grinding for his family because nobody else would. He's not the only one telling this story, but he's one of the loudest. Critics and hip-hop writers say Youngboy's music isn't just about his own life. It's a mirror for a lot of kids who grew up the same way. They point out how his lyrics shift from rage and defiance in the early tracks to something softer, almost longing, as he gets older. There's a reason for that. When you grow up with nothing but loss and hard choices, you learn to protect yourself, but you never stop wanting what you lost. That's what makes his music hit so hard. It's honest about the pain, but it's never hopeless. The numbers back it up. In Louisiana, over 60% of people serving sentences longer than 50 years are black men. Most from places like Baton Rouge or New Orleans. That's not just a statistic, it's a cycle. One generation gets locked away, the next one grows up with a hole in the family. Youngboy's art is proof of what that does to a kid. He turns trauma into testimony, telling the world what it costs to survive the system. Every bar is a record of what happens when the courts hand out decades like they're nothing, and families get left to pick up the pieces. Some experts call it generational trauma. Others just call it survival. Either way, you can hear it in every track. Youngboy's music isn't just about him. It's about a whole world of kids learning to live without fathers, without safety nets, without promises. He raps it so the pain doesn't swallow him whole, and every time someone listens, it's like a piece of that weight gets shared. That's the legacy of absence, a voice that refuses to be silent, no matter how heavy the story gets. In 2009, Jeffrey Gaulden was sentenced to 55 years in a Louisiana prison for armed robbery, when his son Kentrell, known today as NBA Youngboy, was just 8 years old. Court records cite prior convictions and mandatory minimum laws as key factors in the length of the sentence. Despite extensive research, no official trial transcripts or detailed sentencing documents have been made public, leaving some aspects of the legal process unconfirmed. What is clear is the profound impact this absence had on Youngboy's upbringing, documented through interviews, social media posts, and his own lyrics. Studies show that over 60% of black men serving long sentences in Louisiana come from similar backgrounds. The facts reveal a legacy of trauma passed through generations and echoed in Youngboy's music. The unanswered questions around the case serve as a reminder of the gaps in the public record. But one truth stands: a single verdict reshaped a family, a childhood, and an artist's voice forever.